Mining has long been the backbone of industry, fueling our world's growth, but beneath that progress lies a hidden history of unimaginable risk and sacrifice. For the men and women who worked in these mines, each shift held the threat of disaster. Danger wasn't just a possibility, it was their daily reality. In suffocating darkness, they toiled, breathing in toxic dust, surrounded by walls that could collapse without warning, all for a chance at a livelihood. In this video, we uncover some of the most tragic events in mining history. These disasters didn't just take lives. They shattered entire communities and left a haunting legacy of loss and resilience in the relentless pursuit of progress. The Hawks Nest Tunnel Disaster. In the early 1930s, the small towns lining the New River Gorge in West Virginia buzzed with promise as construction began on an ambitious project. A tunnel to divert the river's flow for a new hydroelectric dam. For many, this project represented a lifeline during the depths of the Great Depression, offering steady work in a region that had been battered by economic hardship. Men from across the state and beyond came, hoping to build a better future for their families. Among them were hundreds of black workers from the South, lured by the promise of a wage no matter how low. They worked in grueling conditions, without the protections afforded to their supervisors, and faced the perilous task of drilling through dense, silica-rich rock with little knowledge of the dangers that lay within. Day after day, the men tunneled deeper into the earth, carving through silica-heavy stone. Each strike of the drill released a cloud of fine white dust that settled thickly over the workers, clinging to their clothes, skin, and lungs. Unlike the clear, violent dangers of explosions or cave-ins, this danger was silent and invisible, but no less deadly. The air grew dense with silica dust, turning every breath into a dose of poison. While inspectors and supervisors on site wore protective masks, the men doing the laborious work below ground received nothing. Even as clouds of dust became constant companions in the suffocating heat and darkness, there was no relief. The men worked on, often locked inside the tunnels, unaware that each breath they took was carving a path to an early grave. Within months, workers began to fall ill. At first, they dismissed the coughing, chest pains, and fatigue as temporary ailments from the strenuous work, but the symptoms worsened, transforming once strong men into shadows of themselves, struggling for each breath as if their lungs were turning to stone. By 1931, it became clear that the men were succumbing to something far more sinister than exhaustion. They were dying of acute silicosis, a deadly lung disease caused by inhaling fine silica dust. The disease moved fast, ravaging the miners' lungs with no cure or treatment available. Families watched helplessly as their loved ones, who had only recently found work, withered away before their eyes. In total, over 476 men lost their lives, most within a matter of months. Communities were left shattered, with wives, children, and parents grappling with the staggering loss. Yet, Union Carbide, the company overseeing the project, offered little in the way of compensation or acknowledgement. Anger simmered as the truth emerged. The risks of silica exposure had been well known, and the supervisors who entered the tunnels briefly wore masks to protect themselves. Yet these precautions were denied to the workers, whose lives had been deemed expendable in the pursuit of profit. The Hawks Nest Tunnel disaster sent shockwaves across the nation, exposing the deadly cost of neglect and exploitation in American industry. The Courrieres Coal Mine Disaster. On a chilly morning in March 1906, the mining town of Courrieres in northern France was bustling with life as workers, many with families close by, descended into the deep coal shafts. Beneath the earth, this was the lifeblood of the town, a place where generations had worked, carving out their living from the dark veins of coal that fueled Europe's rapid industrial growth. The Courrieres mine complex was vast, with interwoven tunnels stretching for miles, making it one of France's most productive coal mines. Yet, as families saw their loved ones off to work that day, there was a sense of unease. Days prior, smoke had been seen rising from one of the shafts, a signal that a fire had broken out underground. Still, production continued, and no one could have foreseen the catastrophe that would soon engulf the mine. On March 10th, just after sunrise, a thunderous explosion ripped through the mine's depths. The blast was so powerful that the ground shook, and a plume of smoke and dust billowed from the mine's entrance, darkening the skies over Courrieres. Inside, the explosion spread with terrifying speed, igniting coal dust and gases that had accumulated over days. The sheer force of the blast obliterated the mine's wooden supports and sent rock, coal, and debris crashing down, trapping thousands of miners in an instant. In the interconnected shafts, workers scrambled to find escape routes, only to be met with deadly walls of flames or collapsing tunnels. Above ground, families and workers gathered at the mine entrance, horrified as the reality set in. The explosions had not only devastated the mine's interior, but had even reached the settlement above. Buildings collapsed and the sounds of wailing filled the air as word spread that hundreds, including women and children who lived above the mine, had perished. The entire town seemed frozen in disbelief and despair as rescue teams began to organize a response. In the chaotic hours that followed, rescuers faced tremendous obstacles. Many were forced to wait as the mine's conditions were deemed too dangerous to enter immediately. The intense fire, lingering poisonous gases, and unstable ground all conspired to delay rescue operations. Those who ventured in found the tunnels nearly impassable, strewn with rubble and twisted remains of mine carts and supports. Days passed, and families waited with dwindling hope, desperate for news of their loved ones. But every day that passed made survival less likely, and frustration turned to anger as the public learned that authorities had chosen not to send rescuers into certain areas, fearing additional explosions. The growing sentiment was that more could have been done to save lives, and officials' reluctance to act decisively sparked a wave of fury across the region. Then, nearly 3 weeks after the explosion, a glimmer of hope, 13 miners were found alive. Emaciated and traumatized, they emerged from the darkness, having survived by drinking stagnant water and breathing pockets of remaining oxygen in isolated areas of the mine. Their incredible survival story captivated the world, drawing international media attention to the disaster and placing a harsh spotlight on France's response. The miraculous survival of these miners became a powerful symbol, yet it also fueled the outcry, as many wondered if more lives could have been saved had rescue efforts been managed differently from the start. The aftermath of the Courrieres disaster was profound. The French government faced relentless criticism for failing to enforce stricter safety protocols. And the tragedy sparked calls for mining reform not only in France, but across Europe. Workers rallied, demanding better conditions, regular inspections, and improved ventilation systems to prevent such deadly gas accumulations. The disaster underscored the dire need for safety measures in mines, including gas monitoring and dust control, to ensure that profit would never again be prioritized over the lives of miners. The Courrieres disaster became more than just a tragedy for a small mining town. It transformed public perception, shining a light on the dangerous conditions faced by miners across Europe and the often neglected safety standards that left them vulnerable. This catastrophe marked a turning point in industrial safety, with rippling effects that would shape mining regulations for years to come, forever engraving the events of March 10, 1906, into the annals of industrial history. The Benxihu Coal Disaster. The Benxihu disaster, a tragic chapter in mining history, unfolded on April 26, 1942, amid the harsh realities of World War II. Located in the coal-rich Liaoning province of China, the Benxihu coal mine was under Japanese control and operated under grueling conditions. Chinese laborers, often forced into back-breaking work, toiled in this vast mine with little protection, and some were even locked inside to prevent escape. For these miners, the shifts were long, the conditions brutal, and the threat of punishment constant. They worked in deep, narrow tunnels filled with coal dust, with inadequate ventilation and no safety protocols in place to protect against the hidden dangers lurking in the depths. On that fateful day in April, a seemingly ordinary shift turned catastrophic when an explosion tore through the mine's shafts, ignited by a lethal mix of methane gas and coal dust. The blast sent shockwaves through the tunnels, shaking the ground above and filling the mine with thick, choking smoke and toxic gases. Trapped underground, the miners had little chance of survival as the dense, poisonous air spread rapidly through the mine's interconnected shafts. Those close to the blast were killed instantly, while others were left to endure the terrifying realization that their oxygen was quickly depleting. As news of the explosion reached the surface, families and townspeople gathered around the mine, hoping for any word of survivors. But, in a heart-wrenching turn, Japanese authorities reportedly chose to seal off the mine's entrances rather than immediately initiate rescue efforts. Concerned more with containing the fire than saving lives, they effectively cut off any remaining oxygen flow, leaving those who had survived the initial explosion to perish from the fumes. Days passed in excruciating silence before the entrances were unsealed, and by then it was too late for the hundreds still trapped inside. When rescue teams finally descended into the scorched and smoke-filled tunnels, they found a scene of unspeakable devastation. The disaster claimed the lives of 1,549 miners, marking it as the deadliest coal mining accident in recorded history. The horrific toll underscored the dangers of industrial exploitation and the absence of humane labor practices, particularly in wartime. The tragedy left families and communities shattered, their grief mingling with a sense of injustice and outrage. For decades, the memory of Benxihu remained a painful reminder of the human cost of forced labor, a shadow over both Chinese and Japanese histories. In the years following the disaster, the incident came to symbolize the urgent need for worker protections and safe labor practices worldwide. As we've seen, the cost of mining has often been paid in lives, with countless men and women facing unimaginable risks beneath the Earth's surface. These tragedies left scars not just on families and communities, but on entire nations, serving as a stark reminder of the human toll behind industrial progress. While mining practices have evolved and safety measures improved, the legacy of these disasters endures as a testament to the strength and sacrifice of those who worked in the mines. Their stories compel us to remember the lessons hard-won in those dark tunnels and to honor those who labored and often perished in the pursuit of a better future. Thank you for watching. If you found these stories interesting, please consider liking and subscribing and stay tuned for more fascinating, fatal stories that have shaped our world.